The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler, September 22nd. Saint Phocas the Gardener, Martyr. Phocas died by the gate of the wall of Sinope, a city of Paphlagonia, on the shores of the Black Sea. His livelihood was the cultivation of a small garden, and devoted to his humble and hard work, he imitated the virtues of the anchorite saints. Thus, he was as completely happy as our first parents in paradise. Since they sinned, the earth ceased to yield its fruits of its own accord and required the sweat of man's brow. Yet to Phocas there was no greater delight than that of tending his garden and pruning his trees, for he considered that there could be no task more useful, necessary, and natural, nor another better adapted to maintain in man the vigor of the mind and the health of the body than tillage. There can be no better field for contemplation than that of a garden in bloom, where our souls necessarily rise to God with prayers of praise and love, and where our fervor is stimulated by seeing the generosity with which He pays our labors and multiplies the seed He receives, while at the same time inciting us to shed tears for our ingratitude toward God. Saint Phocas thought of all this. He united prayer to work, and his garden was for him like an open book and an inexhaustible source of meditation. His house was always open to everyone, even to strangers and pilgrims who could not find a place to stay. And after several years of liberally distributing the fruits of his labor among the poor, he was also worthy to give his life for Christ. Suddenly, a cruel persecution against the church broke out in Paphlagonia. Phocas was singled out as a Christian, deprived of the formalities of a trial, and a party of soldiers was sent to kill him on the spot where they found him. When the soldiers arrived at Sinope, they could not enter because the gates were locked, and they sought asylum in the garden of Phocas without knowing that it was he. As usual, the saint received them kindly and invited them to dinner. When they were all seated at the table, the soldiers revealed to their host the details of the task they had been given and asked him to inform them where they could find Phocas. The kindly gardener told them that he knew Phocas perfectly well, and that the next morning he would give them information about his whereabouts. At nightfall, when they had all retired to sleep, Phocas fell into the garden for his own burial, and having finished his task, knelt down to pray in order to prepare his soul for the last hour of his life. Thus the dawn surprised him, and then he got up and went to the house in search of his guests to announce that he had already found Phocas, who would be in their power as soon as they wanted to apprehend him. The soldiers asked where they could find him. "Here he is," replied the martyr, stretching out his arms. "I am the man you are looking for." At first the soldiers were paralyzed with astonishment. Then they began to move, not knowing what to do or what to say before this man, who had so generously welcomed them, and who now resolutely handed himself over to them to be killed. Phocas, noticing their confusion, encouraged them to do their duty, since he regarded his own death as the greatest benefit they could render him. After some hesitation, and without a word being spoken, the soldiers took Phocas out into the garden and cut off his head. In the course of time, the Christians of Sinope built a magnificent church that bore his name. Around the year 400, Saint Asterius, Bishop of Amasea, pronounced the panegyric of this martyr on the occasion of his feast day in a church that boasted of possessing part of his relics, and said that Phocas, from the moment of his glorious death, became a pillar of the churches of this world. He calls all men to his house, and there he always receives them with great benefits. The roads are continually traversed by pilgrims who come from all the counties to pray where he raised his prayers. The magnificent church that preserves his remains is the place where the afflicted find relief and consolation, the sick find health, and the needy find abundant provisions in its cellars. And any place where his relics are preserved and venerated, even a small part of them, as in this church, becomes the enclosure where Christians most desire to dwell. St. Asterius added in his panegyric that the sailors of the seas of the Euxine, the Aegean, the Adriatic, and the oceans sing hymns in his honor, and very often the holy martyr has succored and saved them from innumerable dangers.